They say you can tell everything about a person by the way they look at someone who can't give them anything in return. I didn't believe that until the night a room full of millionaires turned their eyes on a woman who clearly didn't belong, and one voice cut through their whispers like a knife. If you believe that respect should never be determined by a bank account or a last name, make sure to like and subscribe, because what happened that night at the Kane estate will stay with me forever. It was one of those coastal evenings where the ocean mist rolls in early, wrapping the sprawling gardens of the Kane estate in a thin silver veil, making the glow from the grand ballroom's chandeliers seem almost unreal. The charity gala was the social event of the season, an exclusive gathering where the wealthy came to sip champagne, exchange favors, and pretend their small talk was philanthropy. I'd been covering these events for years as a society columnist, my job being to smile, observe, and capture the night in polished sentences for readers who love to peek into lives they'd never touch. I knew the type: sleek gowns that whispered against marble floors, cufflinks that cost more than a working man's car, laughter that was always half performance. But that night, my attention was drawn to something different. She was standing alone near the refreshment table, a figure who didn't fit the scenery, a young woman in a pale, modest dress, the kind you'd find on a department store sale rack rather than a couture runway. Her hands rested instinctively on the curve of her stomach, a stomach that left no question she was several months pregnant. She wasn't mingling. She wasn't trying to be noticed. But in this crowd, her very existence was a spotlight. I later learned her name was Elena. I first noticed the whispers before I noticed the woman who started them. Claudia Vance, blonde, sharp, and always dressed as if she were about to shoot a magazine cover, stood with a semicircle of admirers, her champagne flute poised like a prop. Claudia had a gift for making her cruelty sound like wit. "Who brings that to a formal gala?" she murmured loudly enough for her group to hear, eyes locked on Elena. A titter of laughter rippled around her, thin and mean. Honestly, is she with child, or is this some kind of avant-garde fashion statement? Another laugh. Elena froze mid-sip of water, her knuckles whitening on the glass stem. I could see it, the effort it took for her not to shrink under their stares. The cruelty escalated with the kind of casual malice that people like Claudia wield as sport. "Maybe she's here shopping for a father," Claudia quipped, a mock sympathetic pout curling her lips. It's a target-rich environment, after all. The group laughed louder this time, the words drifting across the room like poison smoke. I wanted to step in. God, I should have stepped in, but the unspoken rules of these events held me in place. A misstep here could mean being blacklisted, and I wasn't naive enough to think my editor would defend me. But I kept my eyes on Elena. She didn't respond, didn't take the bait. She just placed her glass down carefully, her shoulders squared even as her eyes betrayed the sting of humiliation. Then, something shifted. A figure detached from the cluster near the far side of the room. A man whose mere movement drew attention without effort. Adrian came, billionaire industrialist, notoriously private, and the reason half the room had shown up. He wasn't the loudest presence in the ballroom. He didn't have to be. Tall, sharply dressed in a black tuxedo that was as understated as it was perfect, Adrian had the air of someone who never needed to raise his voice to be heard. Yet when he did speak, the entire ballroom went still. And in that moment, he was walking directly toward Claudia's group. No, not toward the group, toward Elena. Claudia, sensing an opportunity to perform, stepped slightly forward. "Adrian, darling, I was just..." But her words cut off when his voice slid in, quiet but carrying an edge that sliced through the air. "That's quite enough." The way he said it, it wasn't loud, it wasn't angry, but it was final. Conversations around us faltered, glasses paused mid-air, even the string quartet seemed to lose a beat. Claudia blinked, color rising to her cheeks, and for once, she had no quick retort. Adrian didn't spare her another glance. Instead, he turned to Elena, his entire expression softening in a way I hadn't seen from him before. "Elena," he said, and the familiarity in his voice landed like a stone in the still water of the room. He knew her. The billionaire who guarded his personal life like state secrets knew her name. He offered his arm. "You shouldn't be standing here alone." She hesitated, glancing around as if uncertain whether this was real, but eventually took it. The room seemed to lean in as he guided her away from the hushed crowd, his hand steady at her back. I trailed them with my eyes as they moved toward the terrace doors. Outside, the coastal breeze caught Elena's hair, and I could just make out her voice, low, uncertain. I couldn't hear the words, but Adrian's reply carried enough for me to catch. I told you once I'd repay the kindness. I meant it. That was the moment my curiosity hardened into something else, because I had been covering Adrian Kane for years, and I'd never heard of him owing anyone anything. I didn't know yet what their history was. I didn't know why Claudia's eyes followed them with a mix of fury and fear, or why Adrian's rare display of public loyalty had silenced the room so completely. All I knew was that the air in that ballroom had changed, as if some invisible line had been crossed. Something told me the night's most important story wouldn't be in the charity's press release. It would be in the quiet look Elena gave him before they disappeared through those terrace doors, and in whatever came next. From where I stood near the edge of the ballroom, I could see the faint glow of lantern lights spilling from the terrace, casting long shadows across the stone balustrade where Adrian and Elena now stood, their figures framed by the restless shimmer of the ocean beyond. The music inside swelled again, conversation cautiously resuming as if the room were trying to pretend it hadn't just witnessed the host of the evening shut down one of its most influential guests. But I couldn't pull my attention from the pair outside, because whatever this was between them, it wasn't casual, it wasn't politeness, it carried the weight of something shared, something not yet spoken aloud here, and my instincts as both an observer and storyteller screamed that this was the thread that, if tugged, would unravel the whole evening's facade. I slipped from the ballroom into the cooler night air just in time to catch fragments of their conversation. Adrian's voice low but firm, saying, "You shouldn't let them get to you. You've faced worse than Claudia Vance." And Elena's soft reply, tinged with both gratitude and unease, "I didn't come here to be rescued. I came because Marissa thought it would help," to which Adrian responded, almost wryly, "Marissa underestimates the vipers in this room." And though he smiled faintly, there was a protective edge in the way he stood, one hand resting on the terrace rail as though physically guarding her. She looked down at her hands, twisting them together before murmuring, "This isn't my world, Adrian. I can't pretend to belong here." And that was when he stepped closer, his tone shifting from casual to something steel-edged. "You belong anywhere you decide to be, especially here, tonight." And I caught the flicker in her expression, as though his words meant more than mere encouragement, as though they were a reminder of something between them that I, and everyone else in that ballroom, didn't yet know. Before I could edge closer without being obvious, the terrace door swung open and Claudia emerged, her expression a brittle mask of contrition overlaying barely concealed irritation. "Adrian, darling, I hope you didn't misunderstand. We were just having a bit of fun," she purred, glancing at Elena with a smile too sharp to be friendly. Of course, I didn't mean to offend, but Adrian's gaze on her was cool and measured. "Claudia, there's a difference between fun and cruelty. You've been in this world long enough to know the line." And her eyes flickered, briefly betraying that his rebuke stung, yet she pivoted, aiming her barbs at Elena under the guise of small talk. "Well, I suppose congratulations are in order. Though I do wonder who the lucky man is. Must be someone extraordinary." The implication hanging heavy in the air, Elena inhaled sharply, her lips parting as if to respond, but Adrian cut in smoothly before she could. "That's not your concern." And there was something final in his tone that made Claudia's smile falter before she retreated back into the ballroom, but not without casting one last assessing glance over her shoulder. As the doors closed behind her, Adrian exhaled, turning to Elena. "I'm sorry for that. She won't trouble you again." But Elena shook her head, her voice low. "She's not the problem. Being here is." And there was a moment of silence between them before she added, "I can't owe you more than I already do." And his answer came without hesitation. "You don't owe me anything, Elena. You saved me once, remember? I'm just returning the favor." And I saw her look away quickly, as if the memory was too raw to face here. Before I could dwell on it, a young man in a dark suit approached Adrian with a quiet urgency, murmuring something about a board matter that required his attention, and with a reluctant glance at Elena, Adrian excused himself, telling her to wait for him in the library. "It's quieter there. You'll be safe." And then he was gone, leaving her alone in the cool night air, the faint hum of the party filtering through the terrace doors. I followed at a discreet distance as she moved through the side hall toward the library, and it was there, away from the crowd, that I caught a glimpse of the next twist. A folded envelope, tucked halfway under the edge of an antique globe near the doorway, addressed in looping handwriting to Elena Vargas. She paused when she saw it, her brow furrowing, then picked it up, slipping it into her purse with a quick glance over her shoulder, and something in the way she did it told me that whatever was inside wasn't meant for public eyes, perhaps not even for Adrian. A moment later, I heard footsteps approaching from the opposite end of the hall, the click of heels purposeful, and Claudia appeared again, her eyes immediately darting to Elena's purse before fixing on her face, her tone deceptively light. "You know, dear, not all invitations are meant to be accepted." And there was a dangerous glint in her gaze before she turned and disappeared into the shadows of the corridor. Elena stood frozen for a heartbeat, her hand resting protectively over her purse. And in that moment I realized that whatever history bound her to Adrian Kane was tangled up in something larger. Something Claudia clearly knew a part of. And as the faint echo of the string quartet floated down the hall, I understood that the real story of the evening wasn't the gala, or the guest list, or even the public humiliation Claudia had tried to stage. It was this silent triangle of power, secrets, and unfinished debts. And I had the uneasy sense that before the night was over, one of them would decide the cost of keeping those secrets was too high. The library was dim except for the golden pool of lights spilling from a brass lamp, and Elena stood near the tall windows when Adrian returned, his expression tight from whatever bored matter had pulled him away. I could feel the tension humming in the room even before Claudia's heels clicked on the marble outside, and she stepped in without knocking, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I thought we could all clear the air, since there seemed to be so many unspoken things between us." But Adrian didn't give her the stage this time, moving to stand beside Elena, his presence a quiet declaration of allegiance. Claudia's eyes flicked to Elena's purse with unmistakable interest, and then came the jab. "You didn't tell him, did you? About who sent that letter?" And Elena's hand tightened around the strap, her voice calm but steady. "Because it doesn't concern you." Yet I could tell the words cost her. Adrian's gaze shifted between them, sharp, calculating, before he said, "If there's something you're holding back, Elena, I'd rather hear it from you." And for a moment, the room seemed to shrink to just the three of them. Finally, she reached into her purse, pulled out the envelope, and held it out, not to Adrian, but to Claudia, her tone cool as glass. "This was meant for you, wasn't it? You just weren't brave enough to face him yourself." And Claudia's mask cracked, her eyes narrowing. Adrian took the envelope from Elena's hand before Claudia could snatch it, opening it and scanning the contents in silence. The only sound the faint rustle of paper. When he finally looked up, his voice was low but lethal. "So this is what tonight was about. Blackmail dressed up as gossip." And Claudia's poise dissolved into sputtered denials that no one in the room believed. Adrian stepped forward, his words cutting clean. "Leave, Claudia, before I make public exactly how deep your debts run." And without another word, she turned and swept out, the echo of her departure oddly hollow. In the quiet that followed, Adrian looked at Elena with something softer, saying simply, "You didn't have to protect me." To which she replied, "It wasn't about you. It was about not letting her win." And for the first time all evening, I saw a genuine, unguarded smile pass between them. Later, as I watched them re-enter the ballroom together, the crowd parting instinctively around them, I knew the power in that moment had nothing to do with wealth or status. It was in the way Adrian had chosen to stand beside her without hesitation, and the way Elena had stood her ground without flinching, proving to everyone, including herself, that she belonged there not because of who defended her, but because of who she was.